Everybody's got their balloons on. Nice.
Oh, well.
You have to be festive.
Let's see here. Okay, so while I'm getting this set up, hopefully everyone sees my screen here. Is that right? Can everyone see?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. So my name's Sean Flaherty, Principal Planner and Co-Coordinator at Triangle J Council of Governments, Triangle Clean Cities Coalition. This is part of the U.S. Department of Energy's Clean Cities peer-to-peer exchange, which basically allows clean cities coalitions across the country to seek help from each other and guidance, lessons learned, best practices on any topic that's, under the Clean Cities umbrella, which is to reduce the use of petroleum through any means necessary, and transportation demand management strategies are certainly part of that. Transportation demand management is a program type that incentivizes anything besides a single occupancy vehicle commute. So any way of commuting to work besides driving alone, whether that's telework, transit, and there's even a alternative fuels component in some TDM programs across the country. So we're in task 2 of the peer-to-peer exchange, where the Triangle TDM program, which is pretty robust and has been around for over 12 years in the Triangle region of North Carolina, could hopefully help Centralina look at this topic and share some best practices and just collaborate. So Jason Wager here is on the line, who's a co-coordinator with Centralina. So is Karina and Caitlin here from the Triangle. So I think that's what we want to accomplish today is task 2, which is just talking about the Triangle's program structure and participants. And as Jason mentioned, we can do some background information as needed. So, I think this is a pretty casual group and most of each other know each other. So, don't hesitate to interrupt if we're going the wrong direction and y'all aren't getting what you want out of it. Caitlin, did I miss anything?
I think that's most things. I will say, just from my perspective, I know it's a task later on in this peer exchange, but when we do our annual report for Clean Cities, we do include the VMT reduction number that is calculated by the TDM program. So we work pretty closely with those numbers, and they are a big part of the benefits we've seen through Clean Cities in our region.
Thank you. And VMT is vehicle miles traveled, which we'll get into a little bit later, is the primary metric on which we derive, air quality benefits like CO2, NOx, and particulate matter, and all those good things from. So, Jason, from your perspective, did that kind of cover it for everyone?
Yeah. Let me see. I'm going to admit Matt again. Like he.
Can you do that, or do I need to do that?
It popped up for me too. So.
Okay.
I took liberties.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, all I see is the full PowerPoint presentation. So
Matt, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm good to go now.
Okay, you're very faint volume-wise, but we hear you. Okay. So anyway, we'll hopefully hear from Matt in a minute as we do intros. But I think that's a good start, and as we go, I think that's good. Just check in a few times, make sure we're kind of on the right path. We know you have a lot of information and knowledge and your experiences there, and I know as planners and technical folks, we know how we get excited about what we do sometimes and get into the weeds, and it'll be good just to check in, make sure we're all tracking with you at this stage. So
certainly.
Yeah, do you want to do intros with your team then?
Yeah, and just to that point, Jason, another deliverable besides this webinar for Task 2, partnerships and program structure, is a technical report. So, for getting into the weeds, we'll be providing you all with a document that you can reference outside of today's discussion. But yeah, let's go ahead and dive in then. So I think I already introduced myself. I'm Sean Flaherty, Principal Planner at Triangle JCOG and Co-Coordinator of the Triangle Clean Cities Coalition. So in that role, I managed both the Triangle TDM program with Suchi and co-coordinated the Clean Cities Coalition. So Caitlin, how about you go next?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Caitlin Rose. I'm the other coordinator of the Triangle Clean Cities Coalition. I've been in this role since last December, so still relatively new, and I've seen a lot of changes since I first started, but I'm glad to be working with you all and learning more about TDM today.
Thanks. Suchi, you want to go ahead?
Sure. My name is Shuchi Gupta, and I'm the grant administrator or boots on the ground person for the TDM program here. And I have been with the program since last June, and just excited to be here today.
Thanks. Jenna?
Sure. I'm Jenna Coling, and I am a program analyst at TJCOG. I spent the first year I worked at TJCOG working as a data analyst for the TDM program. I am no longer in that role, but I'm happy to talk about what things that I learned while I was in that role and help answer any questions you have.
Great. Claire, are you on?
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm Claire. I am a Triangle Clean Cities intern, and I've been with Triangle Clean Cities since January. And I look forward to hearing all about TDM today.
All right. Thank you all. I think that's it on our end.
Okay. And I just want you to know, Sean, I put up as close as I could find to the Outer Banks from my screen. It's not quite full.
Thank you.
I know how you like making your way out there. So, yeah, maybe Michelle, do you want to introduce and we can go around our group? You want to start?
Sure. I'm Michelle Nance. I'm the Regional Planning Director at Centralina, and certainly enjoyed our first training session on TDM. We've been talking about TDM for a long time, as Sean knows. But the good news is it looks like we, with a current project that we're doing right now, are really setting the foundation for a TDM program that will be more regional in scope for the Charlotte area. So we're really interested in learning from your experiences, both at the high level, but I was also glad to hear from Jenna, at that really micro level about what do we not know that we are likely about to get into. So really appreciate your expertise and look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Karina?
Sure. Sean already introduced me technically, but that's okay. I'm Karina Soriano, a regional planner at Centralina and the co-coordinator of the Centralina Clean Fuels Coalition, and happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
And Matt, how's your volume? Got you hooked up?
Yeah, hopefully better. Matthew Gallman, I'm a regional planner here at Centralina, and I'm looking forward to learning more about TDM today.
Great. And I guess I'll just briefly introduce myself, pretty much insert what Sean said about his title and role, and then just change it to Centralina, co-coordinator with Karina. So then at Centralina for a while, and we're doing a lot of neat things right now, including some regional transit planning and, of course, the rail promotion project as well. And Matt actually is going to be jumping in and helping a little bit as we wrap that work up. But they're all starting to interrelate really well. And so look forward to seeing how we can kind of continue those entanglements, but in a good way. So making the most of this work. So thanks very much. And
all right. All right. Thank you all. So these are the learnings for today. Just a program overview, which hopefully will get us all on the same page since some of us weren't able to make that kind of introductory webinar held a couple of months ago. Then we'll get into the real primary bulk of what we want to discuss today, which is how the Triangle administers the regional TDM program, and then how the partnerships are structured. So a brief timeline, and I'm going to ask Suchi to jump in whenever I miss something, which I certainly will. So TDM has been involved in the Triangle since basically the 80s and 90s. And that was back when the Research Triangle Park was just getting started, and you had big employers like IBM locating to North Carolina and the park for the first time. And really, this was during Governor Hunt's first term, I believe, where some of the CEOs from companies like IBM and Cisco came to the governor and said, congestion's becoming a real problem here in the park and in the Triangle area. You need to do something about it. And Governor Hunt's response was, no, we need to do something about it. And that was really the beginning of a collaboration including things like cost share between NCDOT, local government, and major employers with the goal of reducing congestion. In 1999, Senate Bill 953 was endorsed by the legislature with the goal of reducing the growth in VMT by 25%. That goal has been realized, but as part of trying to achieve that goal, the first statewide TDM plan was authored in 2004 to help meet those Senate Bill 953 requirements. That image there on the right was TJCOG's response to helping push along the goals of Senate Bill 953 with the creation of a 7-year long-range transportation or TDM plan. In 2008, the program was actually established. That's actually when I joined Triangle J with the job of getting things going, which for the first time pooled congestion mitigation air quality or CMAQ funds from the Durham Chapel Hill Carborough MPO and the Capital Area MPO, which are the two MPOs in the Triangle region, to match with that cost share from major employers that I mentioned earlier and other partners, and NCDOT funds. So really creating a very diversified pot of funding to move the program along. In 2008, the program moved from 2 original partners, which I was thinking about earlier this morning. I think is interesting for the Charlotte region because Charlotte's in a very similar situation. The 2 partners in the Triangle that had funding before the regional program as we know it now in the Triangle was launched was the town of Chapel Hill, which is, I think we all know, is a pretty progressive municipality, just doing that on their own. And then Go Triangle working with the park, with the Research Triangle Park. So those programs were already kind of in existence, were in existence on their own, but were not being coordinated in any way. So beginning in 2008, Triangle J was able to actually pull those funds that I mentioned, continue funding those efforts that I just mentioned, but also offer a competitive call for projects for any other entities, whether they be local government, nonprofit, or otherwise, to participate in the goal of reducing vehicle miles traveled. In 2018, the statewide plan was updated, and currently we're looking at updating the Triangle regional plan as a result of that. Any questions or comments on kind of the timeline and history of TDM in the regional, in the Triangle area? Okay.
Let me ask this: the statewide TDM plan that was done in 2018. I know that was a bit of a I won't say rocky, but just a lot of changes happening in DOT. Was that first adopted, supported? I mean, is that still is that the official plan?
Good question. And as you know, I worked on that plan. No, it was never officially adopted. And Debbie Collins, the former director of Public Transportation Division, left. She would have been the one to push that through adoption as the 2004 plan was, but that just didn't happen. And then, as you alluded to, the Integrated Mobility Division took public transportation and bicycle and pedestrian and merged them. And we really haven't gotten to that statewide leadership yet. I mean, we're just hoping to get the funding to start flowing again, as Suchi and I know way too much about. So hopefully that answers your question. It would be great to have the level of state leadership that we had in 2004. Personally, I think there may be some opportunities looking at the Volkswagen settlement and Executive Order 80, where TDM can certainly help aid the goals of CO2 reduction, but we're just not there yet.
But would it be fair to say that, even though it may not be adopted, that, using that as a support plan for initiatives that are taking place regionally or locally, the current administration and leadership, they know about it, and in a vacuum, I mean, that's what we're going by, right?
I would hope so. I mean, the document is really a scan of existing practices across the state, realizing that some programs have become a bit stagnant. and realizing that, Senate Bill 953 is no longer in existence. So where do we go from here? And really, the final recommendation was that we don't just focus on vehicle miles traveled, but we also look at other benefits of TDM strategies like reduction of CO2, like improvements with public health. And I know those items might align very well with some of the broader goals with the regional transit plan and everything else, the MTP update that's going on in Charlotte.
Okay, thank you.
Now, hopefully that helps. You're welcome. Okay, now I'm going to toss it over to Jenna because this is a bit way over my head, but to tee it up, this is the methodology of how the program is structured here in the Triangle, where we pull data to identify local service providers through what we call hotspots. And that information comes from traffic analysis zones, data from the MPOs. So we have what are called local service providers. And through the RFP process, you can only apply for funds to provide TDM services in an identified hotspot through this methodology. But then outside of those local service providers, we also have what's called a regional service provider, which is a separate pot of funds that are reserved for any regional service provider. But let's be honest, that's typically going to be and has always been Go Triangle, which may be like a CATS in the Charlotte area. So hopefully I teed that up, Jenna, and we can go into as much detail as y'all want on this methodology. Just going to tjcog.org and going to the TDM website, you'll see a bunch of background information about this methodology, but we'll include that in the technical report following the webinar.
Yeah, so it is kind of a lot to take in. I understand if you have questions, but I'll try to do my best to describe it in detail now. So the hotspots that you see on the map are just the little dots, targets really, dots with circles around them. And there are 61 in total. The reason some of them are black and some of them are red are that the black ones are the ones currently covered by local service providers. And the reds are, as of this time, still not covered. And so essentially, these were identified as kind of an update to the original 2007 plan in 2014. So this is well before I was working at TJCOG, but they took modeling data from our regional transportation model, the Triangle Regional Model, or TRM, which is developed by ITRI at NC State University. ITRI is the Institute for Transportation Research and Education, I believe. So it's a very complex transportation model, but from that, we were able to extract something called home-based work trips and look at those on a TAZ level per square mile. So we looked at essentially the trip density for work trips. And this is a rather complicated way of going about identifying the hotspots, but I don't want to make you think it's the only way. If you don't have access to transportation modeling data that gives you an output like this, you can certainly also use LEHD loads data on work trip locations, and there are other potential ways to do that I'd be happy to discuss if need be. But essentially what we did was we looked at the TAZs that were over 3,000 trips per square mile. Those are the yellow. And then we had the red, which is like the next category. And then the really, really dense work trip zones in the purple. And these were chosen either because, there was a very high concentration of trips there, or some were universities or colleges in the region or large employers who already had established TDM programs at their place of employment. So they were really easy partnerships to form. And then also central business districts or areas with concentrated office and retail development. We have quite a few of those scattered throughout the triangle, kind of in a cluster type pattern. So we identified these 61 hotspots, and then essentially currently we have about 12 local service providers who provide outreach to those regions. 5 of those are universities or colleges, so they're just responsible for their hotspot or their university or college. The remaining 50 are divided among the different service providers who cover a region. So Town of Chapel Hill covers the hotspots in those regions outside of University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. City of Durham covers all of the hotspots in those areas. And so essentially any potential employers that they want to provide education or marketing and outreach type services to, you know, City of Durham, that local service provider is going to be responsible for outreach in those areas. We also have one for RTP, the City of Raleigh, and then Wake County, which is essentially everything outside of the City of Raleigh municipal boundaries. We have one now in Apex and Orange County outside of Chapel Hill. So essentially there's always going to be somebody that is in charge of the areas that are shown here. And again, those were identified either because they already had established TDM programs that we could partner with, or they were areas that we identified as essentially being the best opportunity for providing TDM services and then hopefully reducing VMT as a result. So I'll just stop there and see if there's any questions.
Thanks, Jenna. And I'll just make a quick point. I think the town of Apex is a good example, as they're coming on as a TDM service provider funded through the RFP process for the first time. And the reason why they were able to apply is because they were identified as a hotspot when they previously were not through this methodology.
Hey, Sean, I see the red dots. You know, you said those were unserved right now, and they're clear. They seem to be very clearly kind of over the county line, if you will. Can you talk a little bit more about the what you know, maybe what's missing or what the gaps are there?
Funding. You know, I might toss it to Suchi for that. You know, we only have so much money. I believe it's 1.8 million total in grants each fiscal year across, you know, the 12 programs, with Go Triangle taking a majority of those funds. But now that I mentioned that, that's part of the regional service provider role to fill those gaps that might not have a local service provider. Suchi, do you want to help out a little bit there? You might be on mute, Suchi.
Sorry about that. Yeah, no, thanks. So I think, yes, you're right, Sean, the funding is an issue, and one has to prioritize funding depending upon, you know, what are the areas which can give us best return, you know, for the money spent. And also those red dots, they are in the rural areas. They're, the trip density was on a very low side, and none of the organizations to apply, you know, from those areas for funding. And I believe these hotspots, they're based on a 2013 model. And Jenna, please chime in where I am, whatever I'm missing.
Nope, you're correct.
This will be updated by the new model, 2016 model, whenever it comes, and likely these might come, you know, come in a higher, get a higher trip density rate. And if an organization applies, sure, you know, the grant would consider them. And as Sean mentioned, the Wake County coordinator does cover these hotspots if there is a request.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask this: we've got the regional service provider Go Triangle. They fill in the gaps. So, for example, who is the local service provider up in Hillsborough in Orange County?
There's not right now.
Okay. What about pick another one? So what about in Carborough?
We actually, well, I was just going to say, I believe the Orange County service provider would cover Hillsborough. They do a lot of outreach essentially in Orange County outside of Chapel Hill and Carborough. I believe Carborough is essentially a partner to Chapel Hill. They work together quite a bit. But Shuchi,
Yes, you're right,
you can verify.
So the Orange County service provider, is that the demand response provider for that county? Is that what we're talking about?
Orange County is a local service provider, so they manage it. And regarding Carborough, I know they do not apply directly for the grant, but they do partner in the background with Town of Chapel Hill on some pieces of the program.
I apologize. I didn't realize Orange County was a service provider. But Michelle, the town of Chapel Hill receives funds and UNC Chapel Hill receives funds, both separately. So between those two, Carborough is essentially Chapel Hill. And I suppose then, to correct myself, Orange County, as Suchi and Jenna pointed out, or serves Hillsborough.
Okay. I guess what I'm getting at is so Chapel Hill, Carborough, as the town, they have their own transit system.
Right.
But then most of the other service providers include the rural demand response, county by county system. And the reason I'm asking that is, I guess, first of all, verify that.
Sure.
Is that okay? Because we have every county obviously has a service provider that does demand response, but they're not all affiliated in our region. They're not all affiliated with the county. Sometimes they are nonprofit organizations or some other construct. So I was just verifying that. Okay.
Brendan Boma, who Jason knows, we've worked with before, is actually the Orange County Sustainability Director, and he is very active in our regional TDM stakeholder group. So we can be in touch with him and answer any more specifics that you might have, or Jason, if you want to reach out directly to Brennan, obviously feel free to.
Yeah, no, I think for now it's good just to kind of understand the concepts, relationships, etc. And I think for me, and maybe this is where Michelle's headed, just trying to do some analogies in my head to our region and kind of what versus what would be unique to us, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of why I was mentioning the town of Apex example. I would akin them to, I don't know, let's say a Belmont, that has seen explosive growth and is just a little bit outside of, of Charlotte, but far enough, right? And congestion is certainly an issue in Belmont. And same with Apex, has seen explosive growth. I would know that's where my folks live. But through this model, we were able to identify them as a hotspot. And because of that, the town was able to apply for funding. And I think Suchi made a good point earlier. It's not only about them being designated as a hotspot, they being any municipality through this methodology being designated, but also if there's just local interest, because sometimes there just frankly isn't local interest. We require a 50% cost match from any service provider. So sometimes the interest just isn't there. Thankfully, the interest was there in Apex, but at least with the triangle model, I would imagine to your point about thinking about correlations, those kind of political undertones, if you will, and level of interest might be an issue for some areas where you'd really like to see a local service provider.
I think I'll add to just reinforcing what Sean said. I think the 50% match is a big part of it. A lot of times organizations want to apply and they have interest, but they can't afford that 50% match. So that's a big piece of it. And Apex decided to apply this year also for the reason that they are going to have a circulator bus service, a new bus service that didn't have any bus service, their own bus service until now. And so they thought the program, would be a good way for them to promote TDM services. And we basically during the, question that says what dictates the 50% match.
Yeah, so is that like a direct requirement from the funding source? I'm hearing, CMAQ, which is typically an 80-20, but just sort of, a little background on that.
Yeah, let's pause on that because I think we've got at least a slide or two
Okay.
on that coming up here.
So I just have some more questions on the methodology here in a second.
Okay.
But, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to point out that I think our next webinar focuses exclusively on performance metrics and this type of, in the weeds methodology. So just, a heads up that, we can spend a lot more time on this, but, the focus of today's webinar is just program structure and partnerships. And this is the core of our structure and partnerships. So we had to touch on it a little bit.
Let me throw some questions out, but no need to answer them because it sounds like maybe there will be next time.
Okay.
So my questions would be, who came up with the methodology, the original? And there may be the same answer to these questions, but who came up with the methodology? Who reviewed and kind of dug it apart and made comment, all that? And then finally, who accepted or adopted the methodology? So
Sure.
just, again, no need to answer now, but would like to kind of hear about that progression.
I can answer real quick. John Hodges Koppel came up with it. It was vetted through staff at TJCOG and the two MPOs, and it was adopted by the two MPOs. And we have what's called an oversight committee, which is representative of the funders. So through that process, the MPOs adopted this along with NCDOT. But we also frequently go to the two MPOs in the region to provide report outs and seek any adoptions, required on their local agendas as well. And Suchi can speak to that more if I'm incorrect.
No, that's right.
Yeah, so maybe again for next time, what I'd like to hear more on then is just sort of the how and maybe the level of formality. Because, if I just were to say, oh, Michelle came up with it, that's different than, Michelle worked with, several consultants across the country or, whatever. Make up your mix of a combination of things. So, again, we can talk about that next time, but I think these mechanics, just like what Jenna has got to share on the technical analysis side, is similarly of interest to me.
Okay, certainly.
I just want to chime in and say that I believe like the original methodology, which was a little bit different than this, was included in the 2007 TDM plan update, which was done by consultants. I can tell you that I spent some time, when I first came on board a little over a year ago, trying to understand where they got the data from exactly and how they came up with it. And I had a pretty difficult time being able to dissect it to the level that I would be satisfied with. So it originally essentially came from like census data. I believe in 2014 when they decided to do an update just specifically to how we identified hotspots, that it was, I'm sure Sean's correct, that it was John Hodges Koppel who decided that instead of using census data, we would use the triangle regional model just because that's what is accepted by the MPOs. And it's like their gold star. So I think, like I mentioned earlier, that it doesn't have to be one specific methodology. You could still use census data or loads data, but it's just whatever is going to be probably, accepted by the people that you're wanting to convince.
Yeah. Jenna, I think we were both on the same wavelength there. I'm going to move to the same next slide while I'm talking. It was Urban Trans. Allison Billings, actually, Jason, that created that 2007 plan that I think recommended that methodology.
Yeah, that was my understanding. So that was kind of where I was coming from. But I think, again, this can be next round, next webinar, but just, those details of how much review and comment and any other like speed bumps, adopting the methodology, kind of questions that came up, all that kind of stuff. So
certainly. So I think we kind of discussed this already, but this is a great little visual as to how the program is structured. TJCOG receives a separate contract from NCDOT to administer the program, and is also responsible for evaluation and monitoring. And then the Best Workplaces for Commuters program, which is a longstanding program that was originally supported by EPA and USDOT, It's now out of Qatar, which is a university in Florida. And as mentioned previously, we have our 13 local service providers serving those hotspots. And then one regional service provider is all that we allow in the annual call for projects, which is Go Triangle. Investment also comes from NCDOT, which we all know we're anxiously awaiting, but then also those CMAQ funds from the two MPOs. So I would see in Charlotte, trying to get CMAQ investment as available from as many of the 4 or more MPOs, I believe, in the region. Obviously looking to NCDOT's existing and longstanding statewide grant source. But then something that's kind of missing here, and maybe it's on the next slide, would be the cost share requirement that we alluded to earlier. Just moving on because we're running quick on time here. This kind of breaks it down. We kind of, to simplify it, have our NCDOT, and these are state funds because you can't match federal funds, which are the CMAQ funds, with federal funds. So that's really important. That's a really important part of the puzzle here. So our CMAQ funds, again, these are from the two MPOs in the region. And this kind of gives you an idea, since the program's inception, as to how this comes together. This does not show the cost share. These are just the grant dollars. But again, there's a 50% cost share required by the partners. And I think there might be another slide about that, but we can get into that. And again, please stop me. I'm trying to move a little quicker here. As far as monitoring and reporting, we have quarterly reports required by all the service providers. We create an annual impact report that we present to our board and the MPO's boards. And then we also have commute surveys. So as far as annual VMT reductions go, this shows you that it's been pretty steady. And don't want to use the word stagnant because you have to keep in mind that population has continued to grow. So the program has been consistently successful. Something that I believe Triangle J does very well is communicate, and this falls in line, with Michelle, kind of the statewide plan update, communicating the benefits of TDM outside of just VMT. When you talk about VMT, that really means nothing to a lot of people, whether it's a major employer you're targeting or even a local elected officials. So this is an infographic example of that annual impact report that Triangle J puts together that talks about things that might be more relatable to folks. Again, down here looking at 58 million pounds of CO2 reduced as an impact of the fiscal year 19 TDM program. That's very meaningful for things like Executive Order 80 and maybe even some other funding sources that might be private sources or a major employer who has a sustainability goal or target. You can communicate the benefits of them being involved in this type of program in that way rather than talking the old VMT language.
Hey, Sean, how many trees did you save though? Sorry.
Good question. I don't know. Jenna?
That might be. I was going to say I can share the link that we do a lot of these fun infographics. It's an EPA calculator. So once you get essentially either the vehicle miles avoided or maybe gallons of gas, you can punch it into their website and then they'll give you a whole bunch of different options for things to show. And these are just like the 5 that we had selected, but there's quite a few.
Yeah.
Sounds like something definitely to include in that technical report. That link.
Okay. Yeah, well, what we're doing right now and trying to update the Triangle Regional Plan is moving forward with what's called a ROI calculator, which you can actually, Lori Diggins created the original VMT methodology for the Triangle program as a consultant. And she also received a grant about a year ago from FHWA to build on that model to create this ROI calculator, where you can literally, it's a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet based tool. Jenna's very, very familiar with it because we're trying to crack that nut. But you can basically pull everything from safety as an output, that's rooted in your VMT reduction statistics to road maintenance avoided as a reduction, as a result of VMT reduction. And it's all, standardized and formalized and endorsed by FHWA. So we're trying to move in that direction to standardize the types of information that we could share with our partners. Suchi, I might let you take this one as kind of the local boots on the ground here.
Thank you. So some of the takeaways that you may want to consider, for your program is, I think developing a regional plan and defining the hotspots is definitely important, because that helps provide a focus to the program. What are we trying to achieve here? For us in the 2007 plan, the single goal is reducing VMT, the growth in VMT by 25%. So yes, I think that's the first place to start. And then having a regional grant administrator that is TJCOG, and which would be you guys, again, is a big plus. Not all the TDM programs around the country have a regional grant administrator, but then in the first place, a regional grant administrator was, that position was created because there was no regional focus. As Sean had mentioned, Go Triangle was working with RTP, Town of Chapel Hill was working on TDM, but they were going in all different directions. And now we have got 14, grantees. So in that sense, having a regional administrator definitely helps. And then I would highly, highly recommend having a committee, like an oversight committee or a working group, whatever you may call. So as you can see in the graphic, we have an oversight committee consisting of 5 members. 3 of them are representatives from our funders, NCDOT, the 2 MPOs, CAMPO and DCHC. And these are the voting members. And the other 2 members, TJCOG, John is a TJCOG representative, and then from NCDEQ, they're non-voting members, but they're there. I think especially just giving you an example of how having this oversight committee helps us. One, we have not monthly, but depending upon what the need is, about 6 meetings per year. And the oversight committee helps to review the RFPs and decide on what the awards are made. So they're in the thick of things. And having an MPA representative, they're always able to go back and convey what's happening on the TDM program to their organizations. And as you know, that the TDM program is facing a funding crunch. So because we had these relationships with these MPOs, we were quickly able to engage the elected officials of the MPOs and create a document, emphasizing and basically pushing NCDOT to release the TDM funding. And it was a much smoother process as compared to what it would have been if there was no oversight committee, no relationship with the MPOs. So in those kind of situations, this is a critical time now. This oversight committee helps, So I would highly recommend, having any such committee for your program too.
That's a good point. Thanks, Suchi. Yes, both CAMPO and DCHC actually signed resolutions. Their board signed resolutions supporting continued TDM funding from themselves and requesting that NCDOT do the same. And it's quite helpful that CAMPO happens to be right down the street from NCDOT in Raleigh, which I know is different than Charlotte. And just to reiterate Suchi's point, while John represents TJCOG on the Oversight Committee and we have Department of Environmental Quality, they're non-voting members because they're non-funding partners.
Okay.
Let's see.
Sean? Mm-hmm. Just another question for next time. Would be curious to hear what pushback you get as a regional grant coordinator or grant administrator. As you mentioned, not every program is set up that way. And it sounds like there's some obvious advantages and would like to hear those as well. But maybe just as interesting would be, what pushback or, friction maybe is created and what you've had to do to address any of that over the years.
Sure.
But just to quickly answer, I would say we have never received any pushback. It has been a very positive, relationship in that sense, very beneficial.
I think just to qualify a little bit from my past experience and past years, there was a little bit back and forth between Go Triangle and Triangle JCOG. So, I think that's been mostly resolved, but in the beginning, as the regional transit service provider, Go Triangle really felt like, this is their wheelhouse and theirs only, but I believe that has been resolved years ago. This slide is pretty self-explanatory. Just the innovation pilots, through the annual call for projects, there's actually 3 pots of funds, one for one single regional service provider, which may or may not be Go Triangle, depending on their work plan and the budget proposal. And then a mix of universities, local governments, and even nonprofits as those local service providers. But then there's a third pot of funds available for any innovative pilot projects. What the idea is, we don't want any service provider to be scared that they can't throw something else out if they want to seek additional funding. And that could even be for the creation of a new local service providing agency. If it is, let's say like a Sustain Charlotte or a local nonprofit that, wants to do something really innovative and cool, but maybe not want to sign on, as an annual recurring partner. Here are just some logos from the different partners providing TDM services around the region. You see everyone from Duke to NC State to Chapel Hill, Durham. I might let you take this one, Suchi, as well.
Sure.
Takeaways.
So yes, a few things that we would like to share from our program is, you see, under our program, all the grantees, they must agree to using a standard online ride matching software, Share the Ride NC. This is managed by Go Triangle, and I would definitely say that this is very helpful. I would highly recommend you guys to consider this, because you see a lot of online softwares are available, and if each of the grantee was moving in a different direction, it would be very hard for us as an evaluation and monitoring agency, because in their quarterly reports they submit all those metrics, and we compile these metrics, and Jenna evaluates and comes up with, how many gallons of gas saved, how many trees saved. But if everybody was using a different software, we would not be able to, have that kind of synchronicity across the metrics. So it would be a nightmare, honestly. So this is really good.
And just a quick timeout on Share the Ride NC. So Share the Ride NC, while administered out of Go Triangle, is actually the statewide NCDOT standard ride matching software. So any NCDOT TDM grantee, whether in Asheville to Wilmington to Charlotte to the Triad, is required as part of their work plan proposal to promote Share the Ride NC in their region. And the contract with the software provider RideShark was actually just renewed. It's very cool because for the first time, they're going to be able to pull data from Uber, Lyft, all the scooter companies, Waze, all the different apps that are out there. They have, as a company, they have relationships, data sharing relationships with these apps for the first time, and NCDOT will be able to receive that data for the first time. So that's going to be a game changer, as Suchi alluded to, as how we consistently monitor the different types of modes, especially the more innovative modes that are coming out.
I have a quick question there. Share the Ride NC, is that something that the service providers use to do their reporting, or are we talking about this is scheduling software that like the transit agencies are using?
So this is the software. Basically, it's a software that's available, and any commuter can download the app or the software, and they can use it to track in their rides if they're going using a van pool or a carpool or teleworking. So in that sense, it helps us to know, or Go Triangle to know, how people are commuting. Are there any changes happening? Do they see a spike in carpool or van pool? And also it helps people around the area, and I believe around the state, to find out a carpool match or a van pool match, those kind of things. So it's used for both ways. And then on a monthly basis, I believe, and on a quarterly basis, Go Triangle sends those stats to each of the individual partners.
Yeah, so it's tracking for commuters, Michelle, but I think your point's well taken. It'd be interesting to know if any data could be harvested that would be revealing to transit providers as well, not necessarily for cross agency scheduling quite yet, but perhaps down the way, because there's certainly different areas of our region, just like in the Triangle, and we hear a lot about coordination across lines and knowing where these commuters are coming and going, coming from and going to, not really caring about political or agency jurisdictions could be interesting. And I know that the tracker, for instance, uses your geolocation on your phone, so it knows pretty closely where you're coming and going from, or maybe what you're avoiding, trips you're avoiding, things like that.
Yeah, Paul Strahl at Go Triangle, his entire job is managing Share the Right NC on behalf of the state, and he actually won a national award for I forgot exactly what the title is, Sushi. Best TDM professional, I'm just making that up, at the Association of Commuter Transportation, which is the national association for TDM professionals. So he's excellent. He's done a couple of webinars for all our statewide TDM partners in the past. So we can try to dig that up, or at least provide some information in this technical report for y'all as to what kind of granular data might be available.
So our individuals, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but if it's something that individuals download and put on their phone, I'm sure everybody doesn't do it, but kind of what percentage of folks do it? In other words, do you have a really small sample that do this, or is it like, no, everybody who's in the Triangle, who's at these employers that are participating, that they're required to download the app and participate?
No, they're not required to download. It's a matter of choice, but that's what we do. That's what the local TDM coordinators do. They promote and they encourage people to download it because it's a matter of personal choice.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And furthermore, this is the right way to say it, but there are masks of Share the Right NC. For example, UNC Chapel Hill and even Duke Energy, I believe, use Share the Right NC as their ride matching software, but you would never know it was Share the Right NC because it's all Duke Energy logoed. It's all embedded within their company's interweb. So we can certainly talk ad nauseum about this because it's very interesting. But to answer your other question, unfortunately, the amount of users has been steadily decreasing. So that's something that was identified in the statewide plan update, and something that we really want to work with the state on to improve moving forward.
And if I could just chime in on that particular point, so I think to Michelle's earlier question, also like how many people actually use it, the metric that we collect that goes into our annual impact calculations is active users. So they track how many people, who downloaded the software have actually used it in the past 3 months. That did not used to be the way we tracked it. It used to be just essentially anybody who had used it, I think, in a year or two. So when they kind of purged their lists of users based on people who had not been using it, or dormant users, we did see the figures go down quite a bit. So now that we have a year and a half, I think, about worth of data where we're just looking at active users, it has stabilized and went up or down, not a whole lot, but I think it's not as bad as we thought initially. It's just that we kind of changed the metric and made it more precise. So it's we're kind of now just getting enough data to really look at trends.
Yeah, you're right. I remember that. Thank you for adding that, Jenna.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you both. I think I'm going to move forward on this slide, Sushi. I'm sure folks have been able to read the bullets here since we've only got a couple minutes left. Some more takeaways, defining goals. I think we talked about plan alignment with all the various efforts going on in Charlotte right now. That's probably a no-brainer for y'all. Branding, through the TDM program, the Go brand has kind of become consistent across the Triangle. I think everywhere but Chapel Hill is either Go Raleigh, Go Durham, Go Cary, Go Triangle. We've talked about 2-year grant cycles because of the administrative headache of having to apply for funds when you haven't even finished executing your current fiscal year's work plan. Relationships with non-traditional TDM partners, that's self-explanatory. Equity is obviously a big discussion right now. Suchi's done an excellent job making the use of social media a little more meaningful. You know, some things that we run into with transportation demand management is a lot of it is qualitative data, right? So if a partner is saying they've, you know, had X number of whatever the social media platform is hits in a month, well, how do we really know if that translated to, you know, a mode shift? And even if we do, how do we really know how many vehicle miles traveled were saved, if any? We talked about updating the plan every 3 to 4 years for the region, considering how fast technology is moving and how quickly the region's growing. And then we also already discussed, I think previously, having more robust performance metrics outside of just vehicle miles traveled. I think the last slide here, let me peek. Nope, just one more. So we just kind of brainstormed some ways that we could continue to synergize or start to synergize with Charlotte. So obviously if Central Atlanta COG is able to administer a regional TDM plan, we could certainly share best practices and lessons learned there. Coordination with major transit agencies, there could be, you know, similarities in how TJ COG has coordinated with Go Triangle versus how Central Atlanta and any regional partners could coordinate with CATS or otherwise. Having a consistent hotspot methodology between the two regions would just strengthen the ability to apply for funds from the state and frankly, probably with our MPOs as well. And that, you know, same thing with performance metrics. If we have consistent performance metrics, it's easier for us to not only, you know, as the two largest major regions in the state, you know, further justify a request for state funds, but also any new federal funds that may be coming down the pipeline. I believe there'll be about $10 million available for transportation projects that reduce CO2 that's in the current federal highway bill that's being considered. So, you know, on behalf of the state, the two largest regions could point to these consistent programs in reducing VMT. And shared work plans like, you know, a UNC Charlotte could coordinate with an NC State or UNC Chapel Hill to share their TDM work plans and really get up and running quicker. So that's all that we have. And, you know, I think we're over time actually. Next steps, the next task, the next webinar is going to be an overview of reporting. So we'll talk about Clean Cities reporting, as Caitlin alluded to. We'll provide a program implementation and checklist program report as part of that for y'all. And then task 5, we're going to roll this up and present to the national DOE Clean Cities program. So sorry for plowing through the end there fast. Obviously, Caitlin and I as Clean Cities coordinators are available through this specific effort for questions, but Suchi, as you know, is real our boots on the ground for a regional TDM program. So all three of us are available. I'm not going to volunteer Jenna. Jenna, you can thank me later because you've already helped us out so much today. But we'll end there. And again, sorry for running short of time here, but any questions or comments? We certainly have some action items written down here.
Sean and the rest of the group, I just wanted to say this has been very, very helpful, and I really appreciated some of the slides that related to synergies, you know, between the two regions, and right. As Jason even said, you know, thinking about, you know, with your knowledge of the Charlotte region, I think that really helped out in this presentation because you kind of know where we sit. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I guess just in the interest of time, we'll look forward to getting the next date on our calendars and all that usual logistics stuff. And did you have a timeline with NREL just to wrap up the whole thing, by the way?
I have not heard back from Sandra yet, but it's on my list to tap her. So, okay. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know everybody's probably got their next call already started or something like that, so I won't keep us. But thanks. Totally agree with Michelle's comments.
Well, thanks everyone so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right,
Bye.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Great presentation.
Bye.
Thank you.